Trump's attorney John Lauro countered with this.
I would like them to try to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Donald Trump believed that these allegations were false.
Constitutional and First Amendment attorney Floyd Abrams joins me now. Mr. Abrams, thanks so much for joining us. So the burden of proof is on Jack Smith, the special counsel, his team, to prove that Trump knew that these election fraud allegations were false. Will that be difficult?
I think they have a strong case. We won't know until the trial itself, but there seems to be a great deal of evidence supporting the proposition that he did know, that he knew well, that he indicated that in so many words, speaking to the Vice President Pence. He's indicated it elsewhere. There's a very strong case, and I think the government, the Department of Justice, looks forward to proving it, that he knew very well what he was saying was not true.
You're a celebrated First Amendment attorney. What do you make of the arguments that we're hearing from the Trump legal team and also from Trump supporters, Republican officials, saying that this is the criminalization of free speech, that Donald Trump has every right to share his beliefs, even if they are false, about how free and fair the election of 2020 was?
I think it is true that he has the right, and I don't think that there's anything that the Department of Justice has done which is inconsistent with that. I mean, if they'd gone after him on the ground that he said, I won the election and Joe Biden lost the election, that is a false statement, but they are not prosecuting him because of that statement. They're prosecuting him in this area because of a variety of his conduct, which involves, in effect, supporting not counting real votes and counting phony votes, and a variety of other things which are not only untrue, but destructive of getting an accurate answer to the question of who won the election. Because once you start down that road, once a president, no less, starts down that road of falsely saying and trying to support steps in support of that, which result in an incorrect answer to the question of who won, then we're in a lot of trouble. And that is not what the First Amendment protects. It protects the widest range of speech, and as I said, it would fully protect, and that there's been no effort to suppress him saying, you know, I really won this election. But there are lots of other things on this stage in this case where he's done things and supported things. I mean, we all heard the call to Florida, in which the president is in effect saying, don't count those votes. Right. I know who won. You don't know who, etc.
Georgia, I think you mean, but yes, I take your point. Is there anything in the indictment that you think goes too far? In other words, Donald Trump telling the crowd we have to fight like hell, otherwise we won't have a country, and then a few minutes later, the riot is going on the Capitol. He's not charged with inciting violence in this indictment, but he is charged with interrupting a procedure of government, even though he did not go into the Capitol himself. Is there anything you think that goes too far?
Look, taking this as a whole, no. By a whole, I mean all the things that led to this disturbance, and far worse than that, this insurrection on January 6th. No, I don't think it violates the First Amendment. I don't think it's threatening to First Amendment interests. I think there was a direct connection between what the president and certainly everyone else at that rally, including his son, had to say, and the misconduct and the effort, in effect, to all but overthrow the government, not to allow the government to proceed to make the decision that the voters had made, to effectuate that decision. So, no, we're in touchy, dangerous areas here, but that's not because the government or the special prosecutor has gone, in my view, too far down the road in their efforts. I don't think that's happened.
Celebrated First Amendment attorney Floyd Abrams, thank you so much for your wisdom today, sir. Appreciate it.